Initialize sequence.
Welcome to The Baldcast, a production of John Canzano's Bald-Faced Truth.
We go way back. Portland kid, Damon Stoudamire joining us. You're in, where are you, Nashville?
Yes, I'm in Nashville right now. Just came down and watched a couple games in the SEC conference tournament. Yeah.
The Georgia Tech thing obviously didn't go the way you wanted it to go. I think there'd be some guys that would want to step back. It made you want to get right back in there and see another game?
Man, John, the thing about me and what most people don't understand is, basketball is life. And, although the Georgia Tech situation didn't work out, it's not going to deter me from anything. You just keep moving, man. That's, I always say, a lot of people, know my story,
yeah.
But a lot of people don't understand my story. So, a setback is nothing but something that you learn from, right? And so when you look back on this and you're reflecting, I did reflecting during the season, because obviously the passion to win has always been inside of me. And sometimes things go wrong. And, I think that in college, there's a lot of times that people don't understand the dynamic. And when I say the dynamic, it's like about 4 to 5 different things that you need to create. And so for me, the biggest thing is, you have to have coachable kids. And so, you have to have coachable kids to do the things that you want to do. And I think that I'm an honest coach. And so sometimes in honesty, every player isn't for me. Mm-hmm. And these are things that you learn as you go along. And so, and being in this situation that I was in this past season, this was the first time, honestly, John, ever that I've coached, that I had at times resistance to, I'll be honest, success sometimes, because I never tell anyone anything that I deem to be not conducive to you having success. It does not matter. Dick Beachel, my high school coach, Lute Olson, my college coach, my first coach, Brendan Malone, to Mike Dunleavy, Darryl Walker, Mochi, all them guys, Mike Fratello, Greg Popovich, like all those guys, with the exception of a couple, they always told the truth. And the ones that didn't tell the truth was the ones that I deemed we didn't have the most success with. And so you don't always have to like what a person says, but you have to respect it if they're being honest. And I think that at times where we're at now in collegiate sports, kids sometimes tend to take it personal. And so I learned a lot from that experience. And you can't always change someone. You can change someone's game. You can help them become better as a player. But who they are is who they are. And so you have to learn. I had to learn from that. And in a lot of ways, it cost me, right? I think that at the end of the day, that's been a lot of my reflection, to be honest with you, because this was the first time. This is the first time, whether it was assistant or whether it was – no, I'll tell you a funny story. Actually, this is a funny story. Here goes a funny story. So I remember when I was at Boston, Peyton Pritchard, Peyton got mad at me. And so I'm trying to help Peyton through his process because he wasn't playing at that time. And so Peyton got so mad at me, he just like, P, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pass you on. You work out with somebody else because, I'm just trying to help you. And so then a couple of weeks goes by, and Peyton, who he is, right? And Peyton, the thing about Peyton, his gift is that he's stubborn. His curse is that he's stubborn. But that's what's made him who he is, if you know exactly who he is. And then he came back and we got right back on track. He said, and sometimes I just didn't want to hear it at that time. But you're right, and I get it, right? And so these are things that you learn, John. And again, the situation at Tech, I own everything that happened because it's just part of it, right? But the trajectory was there, and this year just got a little sidetracked, and I was hoping to get another year. I didn't get it, and that I can live with. I'm fine. I'll get back on my feet, and that's why I'm here. Watching basketball, because basketball to me is life. And so I'm not gonna ever let a situation, you know, uh, get me down or get me against the game that has created a great life for me.
I've always wondered what that's like. You were late in this season. The losses were starting to line up. And do you feel that coming? Do people stop talking to you? Do what is that? What is that like, in the days before you actually sit down and they go, hey, we're moving in another direction?
So, I'm glad you asked that question, because a lot of times, people ask that question, and I know they wonder, because I got a lot of texts. And don't get me wrong, as a coach,
Yeah.
you definitely know the losses are mounting, right? And so, you're just sitting back, and you're trying to figure some things out. You're trying to process everything in real time. What does this look like? Um, how can I save my job at this point? We have a new athletic director who came in, so there's just a lot of different interchangeable parts that's going on, and it wasn't going lost on me. Obviously, that one loss became two, two became three, to the point where I think we lost 12 or 13 in a row. So now you're just trying to make sure that you can make things look right, and the optics and all the different things. And honestly, I thought the Virginia loss was detrimental. I thought that I didn't think, and I did not see that coming. We didn't play hard, and that was the first time. Honestly, I thought, I was like, one or two things. I have milked these kids and got every single ounce out of them, or they just quit on me. And so I didn't want to believe the latter. So I just left it at that. And so at that point, what I decided to do is I'm going to coach these guys, keep coaching these guys as hard as I can. I'm not going to quit on them. I'm going to come to practice. I'm going to give them my all. I'm going to keep getting better. And I'm going to learn from this experience. I'm going to learn each and every day. And so somebody that I trust really well, it became, quit looking at next year, quit looking at what's going to happen next week. How is Damon Stoudamire going to get through the day? And so that's what I started preparing myself for, was how do I get through the day? How do I come in here and be as strong a human being as I can be, so these kids don't see weakness in me? Because we might not be winning games, but you still got to be a leader of men. You got to be a mentor, and you still got to try to inspire each and every day. So for me, it was trying to win the day. Obviously, I would have, I had sit downs with administration. We did that like once a week, and it was just kind of game planning up until for the next season. But still, in the back of my mind, I was still on a day-to-day basis in terms of how I was going to get through everything.
Did today's college game and revenue sharing, it's so imbalanced when you look program to program. It reminds me a little bit of the old NBA. You played in that NBA? Do you see that parallel?
I do. I think that there's a lot to it, John. What I would like to see is funny, because I've talked to a couple people. I've talked to some other staffs. People on other staffs have talked to me, and they asked my opinion. And I do believe, I believe that we're in a time where, in college more than any time ever, there has to be a shared vision. I think that administration and the head coach have to be aligned. It's different, right? When you're holding people accountable, you have to hold them accountable for coaching. You have to hold them accountable for being, the leader and face of the program now, because, you don't have the alignment that you had per se when I was in school. So, you don't have a fan base that's attaching to a player for 3-4 years anymore. Then you have to take into consideration what's your rev share number. Rev share is different than NIL, and I don't even know how many people actually know that at times. the rev shares, the money that the program will get. We know that, and that's kind of, and what the rev share really is that's like your salary cap. And then the NIL, which is considered a third party, is the money that you go out and raise. So if you don't go out and raise any money and don't have that money, then you just have the rev share. So there has to be an alignment with that as well. And so then, you have to be able to come to some middle ground and understand what the shared vision is, and whatever that might look like. So that shared vision, if you're high end, maybe in college basketball, that's a second weekend team. That's a top 25 team. And what you hear, and I don't really know the numbers, and I don't know what it is to be true. I know the number that I had, but I don't know. People tell me that you need, 10 to 12 million, essentially to fill a second weekend team. That's what they're saying. And so I don't really know, because that's something that I can't speak to. But you do just have, the biggest thing for me is just having a shared vision. If you go back, and you think about it, John, it's like when you look at the NBA, it's ironic that all these things are happening in reverse, because Adam Silver is talking about tanking, and guys are, saving money and trying to figure things out, and they're not winning, but there's a shared vision, so teams don't want to win. In college, you got to have the same thing. And fortunately for some of the coaches, they have, in college, that is, they have been able to sustain and given more time to do different things. One guy that stands out for me is Fred Hoiberg, who's done a great job at Nebraska. But Fred Hoiberg was 34 and 67 in his first 3 years at Nebraska, but he was allowed to keep building and keep building and keep building, and until he's done a great job there, and they finished in the top half of the league, and he's going to the tournament this year. So you in understanding the business, John, you understand the business, and you just hope that you're able to sustain and then be able to get through that rough patch, because as well as John, in the NBA, again, you can trade players, you can move players. In college, this is what you have. And so when you have the wiggle room with the money, and this is what, people should understand as well. If you have the wiggle room with a lot of money, what you don't, listen, before I even go there, it's not, in some cases it's about the money, but in some cases it's not about the money, because you can have the money and don't spend it right too. So, but if you have the money, and let's say you go out there and you get what you deem a starting player and he doesn't play well for you, you might have enough money to where you can go get another guy that was like a starting player. But if you don't have it like that, if your guys don't play the way you need them to play, then you're just going to have a one-off, and now you're trying to patchwork a situation and get through it, instead of being able to do the things that you had come into the season thinking you would be able to do.
The college game, we're watching a lot of college coaches that are going off to the pros, right? You see it with college football. Guys are going to the NFL. I kind of think that's going to happen with college basketball as well, because you've got headaches there. These contracts are, it's like unrestricted free agency every year. They're less mature than in a lot of cases than the NBA locker rooms.
Yeah.
Is there something about an NBA locker room that appeals to you in that way?
Well, the biggest thing that's striking to me at times is that, I think that it's become easier for in certain situations to coach a $40 million player than it is to coach a $300,000 player, as crazy as it sounds. I think, for me, there still is a lot of value in college, but the mentorship part, the trust part that guys had in you, and blind trust. And that's not basketball. I'm not talking about basketball on the floor. What I'm talking about is just the blind trust that they had that you're doing the right thing for you. I tried to tell my guys all the time, I don't need nothing from you in terms of money or anything. The only thing I'm trying to do is help you have success that I had as a player, so I know what that player success looks like. I know what it can do for you. I know what it can do for your family. And so those are the things that I would try to speak to them about. And what it is, and it's crazy to even think about this, and this is why I talked about earlier, the shared vision that administration and the head coach of each program, and more importantly, what we're talking about, I would say, men's and women's basketball and collegiate football, that you have to have some alignment, because when you don't have alignment, now guys are allowed to, play with the system, and in the NBA, you're not allowed to play with the system. If you're late, it's a fine. If you don't do something, it's a fine. If if uh if something happens, and it's not like they pay money, it just comes right out your check. Like, there's things that happen, but in college we're still trying to do certain things a collegiate way, but then we're implementing, a professional way of thinking,
Mm-hmm.
and that's confusing to the college coaches. And we don't have a union. There's no coaching union. So you don't have a union as you have with, the NBA or NFL. So you don't have anybody fighting for you. You don't have any rules to abide by.
Right.
And so basically at the end of the day, like, things just happen. You don't have lawyers. Like, if something happens to you in college, you got to get your own lawyer. But we have different groups, and if you're paying dues to the NABC, like, the NABC should be creating some type of platform for lawyers, but the NABC is essentially working for the NCAA.
Hmm.
So you just kind of have the same thing, and then when something else happens, it's just, the rule, the old rule book and the old manual, you can't go by it. What they need to do is they need to me, there needs to be some type of, discussion opened up, and you need to have uh, NBA personnel or NFL personnel, a mixture. You need to have some NCAA personnel, and then you need to have some infractions committees. So now you can try to start retooling some type of real playbook, so everybody will have something to go off of. Because I think the biggest thing that everybody's adjusting to is that. And then the last thing too, um, you know, and I know I kind of went off the grid, and you asked me about the NBA, and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm definitely thinking about the NBA. Don't know if I'm going to do that, but the biggest thing is, I think that coaches, for the first time ever, I think this is the first year that because you hear a lot more conversation, and a lot of it is the conversation that I'm hearing. You hear more conversation of frustration this year with everybody, even the people that are winning. But
Mm.
the frustration, and I was telling somebody, this is the first time in your life that college coaches are coaching kids that make more money than them.
Mm.
So now you got to inspire different, because the issues are different, right?
Yeah.
So the issue might be that that John, he's struggling, and he not right. It's not because his grades is messed up, and he's in jeopardy of being ineligible. It's because somebody in his family could have been stealing his money.
Mm.
Somebody's been calling him. They want him to get a car. Why? Because he's turned into the breadwinner. These kids have turned into the breadwinners in their families. And so when you're dealing with things of this nature, and then you're a coach and you're trying to get these guys to believe in you, sometimes these kids don't know what to believe. And so they have a lot of questions. It's a lot of unanswered questions, and
Mm.
then that goes into the things that I'm talking about, because we still only got 4 hours a week we can be with them, and things of that nature. And that's like not possible with everything that's at stake, both from a winning and losing perspective, but then from a monetary standpoint. Because what people don't really look at is, you know, not even in the NBA, NBA, well, NFL, it is that way, but these kids are actually getting paid 6 months out of the year to do a job, and then they resign for more money. They got the best thing going, to be honest with you. And if you don't find kids that are actually inspired by the money, and they only look at the money as, man, I can take my foot off the pedal. You're
Hmm.
gonna always see, unless there's again some type of rule book or some repercussion. Not every kid, but some kids, they'll just keep on recycling themselves. And you go to 4 schools in 4 years, and you get four different checks, and you can move on. So, it's just become so tricky out there, especially without a rule book and a playbook.
There's a documentary on the Jailblazers coming out. You sat down for this. I sat down for this. What are your expectations on this project?
You know what John, I really didn't even have an expectation. The biggest thing about the whole project was, for me, I just, it was able to kind of talk about some of the wounds that I had when I was in Portland. That's what I would say for me. Being that I grew up in Portland, went to Harriet Tubman Middle School, went to Wilson High School, went off, then came back. And for a long time I held resentment, and I held resentment for different reasons. I didn't hold resentment because of what most people thought.
Hmm.
And that was me getting in trouble, me getting like it was for me, it was way bigger than that, because at the end of the day I was still one of their own. And I felt that I had did enough, and I had an impact in the community, and I was doing the different things, and I always gave back, and I was a philanthropist, and I was doing all the different things. And it hurt me, that I was viewed in the light that I was viewed. And then as you're able to go and you're traveling around the country, and people are looking at me and totally different. But when I go home, I feel like it was
Hmm.
something that, we were stuck in a time warp, so to speak.
Hmm.
And so that was my therapy with it. I think that it's a shame that we're talking about a team that didn't reach its full potential. And at some point, I think that the story needed to be told, because it's really a tale of two franchises, because we see everything that the Lakers became to what Portland didn't. And so it's kind of like, to me, the cloud hung over the Trailblazers, for so long. And the crazy thing is, when you think about it, is like the things that started to happen from that point forward is like you can't make it up. Like, you can't
Yeah.
make it up. Greg Oden gets hurt. Brandon Roy gets hurt. LaMarcus Aldridge leaves. You have all this little stuff to be going on and that you're hearing about, and there was always a cloud over the organization. It may not have been, based on the things that we were doing, because our stuff was off the floor issues, but then the other things, you just couldn't make it up, man. And it seems like what I'm hoping for is, at the end of the day, people can see and hear the story of what it was. But then at the end of the day, it takes this cloud off the organization, because the Portland Trailblazers are needed. Um, the city, the state adores them. If there is no, and I say this to people all the time, I'm like, Portland, Oregon is a city where, if the Portland Trailblazers was ever to lead there, it would kill the city.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be jobs. It would be a whole lot of people in the hole, based on the Portland Trailblazers like not being there, and it saves the economy. And so we need the Blazers to be successful. We need the Fire to be successful. I think the Fire is coming at a good time. As a matter of fact, I bought season tickets for the Fire. So I got season tickets, and so, I think that that's what I want. That's what I hope the documentary does. It puts everything to rest, and although we didn't get everybody we wanted in it, I think we got enough of the suspects that people want to hear from, in that manner of why. And I think that it'll be a good project for people to see.
What were those locker rooms like back at that time?
Our locker room with the Blazers.
Yeah, let's say 2000. Right in the sweet spot where, if you win that 2000 Western Conference Finals, I think you win the NBA championship. You win.
Yeah.
You keep the team together. You probably go back to back.
Yeah. It was a great time. And I say in the documentary as well, what most people don't understand is we went to the conference finals, what I would say, a year too early.
Hmm.
And so what happened is we go a year early, then we come back, and so now we we make a jump and we make that big trade. We make a couple big trades and we get Pip and we get Steve. And so we just knew we were really talented and we knew we were good, and everybody knew we were good. On our bad days, I mean, I remember preseason. We come in preseason, we literally 7-5, and we beating people by 20. We were just really better than everybody. And then the 4 games that we had against the Lakers, they were all wars. But that was the only time there was really a competition. You know, now we lost some games in between, but everybody was pointing towards that, and you know that was what our sole purpose was to get to the finals, get through the Lakers, and go there. So the locker room was always upbeat. We never felt as if we were going to lose. We felt like we were 20 points down, we could still come back. We had some big games during that time. We had a lot of fun together. I think that's the one thing I talked about that as well. I don't think the thing that people understands about that team is that team did everything together. People hung out, guys hung out, girlfriends, wives were together. Like it was about that 2000 team was about as close knit of a group as I've ever been around. And even before before Game 7, before Game 7 when we played the Lakers, we end up changing hotels. I remember like it was yesterday. We changed hotels. We didn't stay at the same hotel. I can't remember. I think we were staying at the Beverly Wilshire. But then we changed hotels, and so we went down to Santa Monica. So we were staying in Santa Monica, man, and everybody was literally in the same room, just kind of dreaming about what this looked like, man. After we win tomorrow, and so that was a close knit unit, and that's the thing about those teams that I don't think people actually knew.
I think Rasheed gets misunderstood too. And I think maybe I was probably guilty of that. When I covered him, he was difficult at times.
Yeah.
But the more I was around him, the more I kind of went, he's a really smart guy who seemed like he would be a lot of fun to be a teammate with.
Man, Rasheed Wallace was great. One of my best friends to this day. He was very smart. He was generous, and he was actually a really good family guy. He was with his kids, like the things that people wouldn't know. I always say this, and I laugh about it now because now that we're older and we're done, I felt like Rasheed back then was like a pro wrestler. He was always in character. So I think when he came to the Rose Garden, he was playing basketball. He was in character. I think that when he dealt with the media, he was in character. You know what I mean? But the moment he got around the people that he loved and he adored, he was out of character and he was himself. He was fun loving. He's a big kid. He liked paintballing. He liked driving that big ass Hummer around the town. He never washed it. Rasheed was just Rasheed. And I think that, in a lot of ways, John, you're right. And once he left the Blazers, and it's easy for everybody to have a sour taste in their mouths. But man, over the next 8 years, once he left Portland, still like he impacted a lot of winning in the NBA. And he was on some really good teams, and he was still almost part of a back-to-back situation in Detroit. So I do agree with you. But I'll say this, John. I think and I think that and we've talked about this, and I think that we can all agree with this. And I would say most of the guys wouldn't understand what I'm about to say. I think that a lot of the media at times was guilty of the Trailblazers. Well, let me tell you, a lot of the media at times was guilty of the perception of who we were because we were basing it on the teams that came before us, and we didn't appreciate what was right in front of us. Because the team that we had was so different from the other teams that grew together, and that's what people don't understand. So we got to know who Clyde Drexler was because he was there for so long. We grew up with Terry Porter. We grew up with Jerome Kersey. We grew up when Buck came. Everybody knew how Buck would. That's the missing piece. We need that power forward. We grew up with Buck Williams. We grew up with Mark Bryant. We grew up with Kevin Duckworth. We got Kevin Duckworth for, the trade that the Blazers got Kevin Duckworth for was next to nothing. So we grew up with these guys. So I think that was the difference. And I think that we were in a different era
Mhm.
at that time, but the Blazers were so beloved, and I think that was the difference. So now you see a different group, a
Yeah.
different cast of characters come in, and I don't think that they were relatable from the standpoint of they just weren't as easy going. And
Mhm.
at that time in the city, it wasn't the media, the media surrounding our team wasn't used to that. And so I really believe that was, one of the big issues,
Mhm.
because now if it was 2026 and that team was in 2026, it's just like that's just kind of what it is.
Mhm.
So
And I think,
I do believe it, because
yeah.
me being from Portland, I understood that dynamic.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fishbowl too. I mean, when I got here, I had the same impact. I looked at the Blazers and I went, wow, this team's got a real chance to own this city. But also, there's a lot of eyes on you in a way that maybe wasn't the same as other markets.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. I agree with that. And so, it's like, Portland is so gentrified right now, but
Yeah.
what I would do, it's like, you had Northeast Portland, and that was kind of like your unofficial home away from home, because I would always say this, once you kind of, whatever direction you went, if you stayed on the freeway and you went macadam, or you tried to go, the backside of 205, man, it was just a certain part of town where, to your point, like, it was just, it was a different fishbowl. It
Yeah.
was a different
Yeah.
fishbowl. Now, it wasn't bad. I
Right.
don't think it was bad, but I just don't think at that time, um, you had you we had people from all around the country in different places where they came from, and Bob, Bob was not was not scared to bring in, somebody that he thought his talent might have outweighed his off court issues. And so, to his credit, he always felt like he could change someone. And what's crazy is that me, as a coach in college, I be feeling the same way when I see somebody, but half of it is my background
Right.
and the things that I studied along the way, as I, was getting my way, and kind of rebranding myself to be, where I am today. So, it was just different from that standpoint. But, it's at a point now where, I think that, guys come to Portland, and you don't have the same thing. Like, you could actually, if you wanted to, I mean, you can actually go find you a nice house in Northeast Portland if you want to, if you really wanted to. You don't
Yeah.
have to go to where they used to, put, oh, you got to go out here, you got to go out there. No, you don't have to do that. Portland's changed from that standpoint. So.
Yeah. You had JR and you had Kemp. Sean Kemp comes in. And those guys were interesting because I think they fall. Kemp probably more maybe than JR falls into the line of Bob thought he could get something out of Kemp late in his career. You had a front row seat for all that when guys would come in. How was that? How was that for you?
The only thing that I was skeptical on, from a basketball standpoint, um, I thought we broke the motto. And there's a lot of different things that play into that, and I don't really know. But when we lost in 2000, you know, the motto was, you just bring back the same team.
Yeah.
That was like what we were used. That's what everybody was used to. If it's not broke, don't fix it. I don't know how anybody. I don't know how anybody in on any team in the NBA at that time could have made a difference to who we were at that time, because it wasn't just playing the basketball. It was buying into the roles. It was, understanding that if you played 35 minutes somewhere, it's probably going to be 22. Playing for
Mhm.
the Blazers, we was going to have, anywhere from 6 to 8 guys averaging at least 20 minutes a game. So you bought into that role, and how we bought into the role was the money. And so we were ahead of our time for paying people and giving guys big contracts. So the thing about it, and going back, building it up, I just just didn't understand why we traded Jermaine O'Neal.
Yeah.
And so for me, when I looked at Jermaine O'Neal, I said, man, you got a young player who, for better or for worse, man, he'll be 13-8, 13-9 by the time he playing. And if you knew because he loved basketball. It was a difference. Jermaine worked his butt off. He loved hoops. He really did. He loved hoops. And so when we traded him, now you got to find somebody to figure out that role again. Brian Grant gets injured, and so that allowed Rasheed to emerge. Now, with that being said, it was still a place for Brian, but then we trade Brian, and now you bring in the Kempers, and then you bring in Dale, and now you're trying to insert two new guys to this system that they don't really understand because regardless of what you did the year before, and I think Dale was coming off an All-Star year, and I'm like, man, you're not, he wasn't gonna start. You know what I mean? Like, and so, it just, now you're putting pressure on everybody, and you put all this stuff in the bowl, and now you're stirring up the concoction, and now the coach has to figure it out. And it was I think it was difficult, but it was always difficult for guys to interject into our team because most of the guys that came were stars. Yeah. If you think about the guys that the one guy that stands out that was really good on our teams when we made a trade was Ruben Patterson because he wasn't the star. He was a role player. So when Ruben came in, Ruben can guard like 4 to 5 positions. He didn't need the ball in his hands. He set screens. He got lost in the little things in the game. He dove on the floor. He was an energizer bunny. The crowd cheered for him. They loved him when he came off the bench. But it was always hard for guys, including myself. Even when I came in, it's hard. It's hard because you got to adjust to what the system is, and so it takes a little bit of time. And I thought that, when we did what we did for Kemp, for Dale, that was difficult to ask them.
Yeah. How about Sabonis? What was he like to play with, and how good could he have been in his prime?
Oh man, Arvydas was really good. He was, it's funny. It was like an ongoing joke. Arvydas would come, and you always knew when he was ready to play, because his boys would come from overseas, and then he'd be, he was ready when the crew came in town. He started tapping those knee braces a little harder. But Arvydas was, I thought that he was one of the best teammates that I played with. I thought it was a shame that Portland didn't get him at its peak, because it would have been interesting to see him playing with Clyde and those guys, and then getting older on the back end with us. Because on the back end with us, that's how he's supposed to look. Yeah. But on the front end, you're talking about an athletic guy, a guy that can shoot the three. He was a little bit before his time, and essentially one of the guys that beat the '88 Olympic team, and that's why we went to pros after that. I thought that he had a lot of value in what he did. I thought he was coachable, and he actually allowed guys to be who they were, because some days you didn't even have to play them. And so that's a luxury. Now you got a guy where, just kind of call on me when you need me. But when I'm playing now, you got to use me. That was the one thing with Sabonis. If he's going to play, you had to use him. But he was a really good teammate. I love being around him. Just such a good guy. It's you don't get a chance to be around guys like him. And then you think about the locker room. You think about the family room. You had, Arvydas kids. You had Domas Sabonis. You had Greg Anthony's son. You had Cole Anthony. You had Scottie Pippen Jr. Like, you know what I mean? So you had so many kids in the locker room that end up becoming pros as well. So, but Sabonis was he was a really good teammate, a really good guy, and had a lot of fun playing with him.
And Pippen, when Pippen comes into the locker room, he comes with the championships. Did that get him that automatic? Did guys look to him for answers, or was there a little bit of, hey, you played with Jordan? How much respect did you give Pip when he came in?
Well, we all wanted to learn from him. We felt like we he was a missing piece. He was the one guy that had won championships, and we hadn't been around. We hadn't been around a guy like him. So he came in with an aura. He came in with cachet. And I think that not only as a team we looked at him that way, I think the city rallied around him as well. He was our Michael Jordan. And I think that
Mm.
we tried. We tried to get as much information from him as we could. And by that time, Pippen had a couple back surgeries. But when he was ready to play and he was locked in, he was as good as ever. He had some really, he had some games even in that Lakers series where he was locked in, and he was tough to deal with. So yeah, we did look at him in that manner. We needed that leadership. We were young, we hadn't seen it before. We were definitely looking for him for the experience.
The Netflix series, the producers, they asked me about the drug test, and I think back to that time. What do you tell people when they ask you about that? Because I get asked about it still, and I look back and I go, "Was it that big a deal?" But you tell me. You tell me.
So the thing about it, when you think about the whole story, John, the story, let's back the story up so people have context of what it
Yeah.
is, right? So, because when you just talk about the drug test, you don't get a context of why. And I think this is where me and your relationship
Yeah.
changed.
Yeah.
I just got tired of looking at all these articles, and man, I'm just getting slandered every day, for this and that. With that being said, I deserved it, you know, because I had got arrested, a couple times for the marijuana, and again, it wasn't. It was more. It got to the point where it was embarrassing.
Yeah.
So for me, uh, I'm catching it from my mother, who, I'm like, damn, I'm disappointing her. But then I'm catching it from the media, so she catching it from people, and then my
Mm.
kids are catching it, and so then, you know, me and you had wrote something, and it was just kind of like, man, actually, I'm gonna back up. I thought so. I quit trusting the media when Rachel Bachman took a piece of a quote that I said, man, and it got blown out of proportion, and
Mm.
that pissed me off. But it was basketball related, but it pissed me off, and I was just like, man,
Yeah.
she can't. And that's what got me guarded with
Yeah.
media. Not guarded, but just got me to understand, like, man, you can't say everything, because
Right.
she took a 5 to 10 second sound bite of a 3 minute interview, and then they playing it on NBC, and now I look like the bad guy.
Mm.
Anyway, me and you're in the locker room. No, maybe it's a
Yeah.
practice facility, and I'm like,
Yeah.
man, you be writing all this negative stuff about me, man. You don't even know me. If you want to get to know me, man, get to know me then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because keep it basketball. Just keep it basketball. You don't have a right to talk about me as a person because you don't know me. You
Yeah.
don't know what I've been through. You don't know my story. And I think that changed our relationship. And so
Yeah.
I think that's where maybe from the standpoint of maybe a player never said nothing to you like that or stood
Mm.
up, but I think that you were like, you know what? I felt like you said in your mind, man, you know what? If he just opened
Yeah.
that up for me, let me find out
Yeah.
who the guy is. So we
Yeah.
talking, and then you just literally so I get in trouble that last time, and so
Yeah. It was
you
the
just said,
airport metal detector one.
yeah,
And
so yeah,
then, yeah, and you had gone. There was a news conference scheduled. I remember the Patterson, the president or GM, whatever he was at the
yeah,
time, had made some comment about trying to trade you for a chair.
yeah,
And I wrote a column in front of that news conference saying, I don't know what Damon's going to say today, but I don't know if I believe him. And but we ended up talking one-on-one in the locker room. And I thought it was that probably was the conversation you remember.
yeah,
I remember you saying, like, you were real. Like, you were always real. I think that's what makes you different than a lot of coaches and a lot of players that I've covered, is you are a real person. Like, you're willing to kind of not be in character, as you say,
yeah.
and you got real. And I can't remember. What do you remember of that moment where I think you said, what could I do to make you believe?
Yes, Yes, it was something
And
to that effect. And so
yeah,
and so you said, well, you said, well, take a
take a
drug
drug
test.
test. I never
Right.
thought you'd say yes.
And so when I said that, and so most people don't understand. See, this is what people don't understand. And I'm all right with it, because
Yeah.
I am who I am, because I talk about it to my kids, I talk about it with my teammates, I talk about it to anybody that wants to know, because it's a part of who I am. And I tell the story of, I'll never forget it. I was sitting at home, and it goes across the bottom of the ticker on ESPN, where the Portland Trailblazers fined Damon Stoudamire $250,000 again. I mean, $250,000. And I seen that, and I said, man, I'm never gonna smoke marijuana again. I said, I can't believe they just fined me that. And for me, like, it was recreational. And
Yeah.
so for me, it was like, you don't believe me, I'll test you. So we get more cheeks. We come to a practice, you do that, you get more cheeks, and we take the test or whatnot. I take the test, it comes back, negative,
Yeah.
and so it wasn't. So it really wasn't. Honestly, it wasn't when I did that, and I took a little slack from the NBPA, but
Yeah.
it wasn't even for anybody, but it was for the people. Like, man, like,
Mm.
look, man, I'm like, you guys got me out here like I'm just like a drug dealer or something, man. It's
Yeah.
just, and
Yeah.
it wasn't even like that. And so for me, that was why I did it. I did it not even to clear my name. I did it to clear my conscience.
Yeah.
And
Do
so
you,
me
do you
clearing
remember
my
the next game?
conscience,
Do you remember the next
I,
game after
I got
that?
standing
Standing
ovation.
ovation. Standing ovation. I got I got to be honest with you, like, because you said test me whenever, and I waited a while, right?
Right.
And then I got Mo, and most like I know you were waiting for it, because I walked in to the facility that day, and you were like, oh, today, like, let's go. And but when you got that standing ovation, how did that feel to you? Because to me, it was the same thing. I looked around, I knew why you did it. You didn't do it for me. You did it for the city of Portland, your neighbors, your mom's friends, the
Yeah.
people who you grew
Yeah.
up with and knew
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. That's the only reason I did it. I mean, because I just wanted people to know, like, it was kind of a turning point in my life, to be honest with you. I just kind of changed from that point on. It just, I wasn't getting on the other side, but it was like I was kind of the team was breaking up. It was changing, you know what I mean? Management had changed, they had let go of Bob, so things were changing. And so for me, I was just like, man, it's just this is,
Yeah.
let me do what I need to do. And, I got to start changing perception. I started to care about my perception. I was like, let me figure out how can I start changing my narrative. Now, I didn't say that out loud to anybody. It
Mhm.
was just within myself. Let me stay out the way. Let me stay my ass out of trouble over something so silly and so stupid. And I'll just move on. You know what I mean? So that's kind of why, I did it. And that's what I
Yeah.
felt.
Doesn't it seem silly now, though, because marijuana is legal,
Yeah.
and that a lot of that happens today, and it's not that big a deal. Like, just the
Right.
attitudes towards it have shifted.
I mean, they always say somebody got to take a hit for something. And I still didn't abide by the rules. So,
Yeah.
it's almost
Yeah.
like it does seem silly, but it
Yeah.
wasn't like I didn't get caught by the
Yeah.
police. I got caught by the
Yeah.
police. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
there's different things and there's different ways. So that's just kind of how I look at it. For me, and I say this, and I say this to everybody all the time. The last time I got caught with marijuana, that's when I said, you know what, this is just not for me. This isn't something
Yeah.
that's why do I always get in trouble? The good Lord is saying, man, it's not for you.
Yeah. I people ask me, they say, how do you get along with Damon? And I always say to them, I said, I consider him a friend. I root for you. Like, when you get a job with the Celtics, I'm happy for you. When you get a job with in college, I'm happy for you. Like, what you do in life, I look at what I did as a job, and what you do is still as a job. And I look at you and I go, that's a guy I believe in still to this day. And I think it doesn't even stem from the test. It goes from the conversation maybe we had before that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I appreciate that. And I think, for me, it's like I think that actually getting in trouble, it it made me stand up and be a man a little bit more. You know,
Mm,
you can't hide, and I would say this, it's even helped me, you know, and with the Georgia Tech situation and getting fired. You know, sometimes, you know, in life you win and you learn. You don't win and you
mm,
lose. You win and you learn, and you think about situations and what would I do, what would I had did different to not be in this situation. And so that was early on, and so that was really the biggest thing. I didn't want to put myself in those situations anymore. I wanted to move forward. I wanted
mm.
to have people proud of me. I wanted to be, you know, one of the people that, you know, not only people in Northeast Portland talk about me, but people in the city of Portland, people in the state. When my name comes up, they understand, like, uh, you know, Damon is an ambassador of who we are, because at the end of the day, like, it's not like we got a lot of us coming out. So, man, like, I want to
Mhm.
be one of the people that inspire people. I want to be one of the people that, you know, on that day, well, Damon did it, I can do it because Damon did it. Like, I want to
Yeah.
be that guy. So, you know, for me, that's important, especially, you know,
Yeah.
where we come from. Yeah.
I think there's a place for you in the NBA as a general manager someday. I kind of see that in your future. Right? It's the progression of your career. I've got you down as the GM somewhere.
Hey, I mean, I would relish that opportunity. I do believe this. You know, and you know, again, it's just ironic enough because we've been talking about doing this for a long time, and I said
Yeah.
wait until after the season. Then just so happened I get fired. But I think that, like, you know, people at times, again, they tend to, when you don't have success, it's how do you respond to it? You know, and I'm not negative and I'm not bitter about the situation, because ultimately, I the left hand column and the right hand column dictates the success of the business that I'm in, and I understand that. But what I do now is I want, especially my kids, and my sons are grown now, so, and I try to tell them, because they're still protective of their dad and they're grown, but I'm telling them, I'm like, man, this is part of it.
Mm,
This is part of it. This is what you guys didn't see. And so the documentary will be enlightening for
mhm,
them because they see it from a coaching perspective. But I'm like, guys, the ridicule that I took in losing in this season don't have nothing on what happened when I was playing for the Trailblazers. And I try to tell people, I'm like, man, until you been booed by your home fans, until you set the bench in front of the people that you know, and you can look in the stands and you feel like you go down the first row of seats and you know everybody, like, that's about as humbling as it get. That's about it. And you in the prime of your career, like, that's about as humbling as it gets, you know. And you know, you're sitting over there and you know the punishment is from the bad you were doing, not from playing basketball.
mhm.
You know, so to me, like, you know, there's always something that comes out of everything, and it made me grow up, and now I just, you know, man, you just stand tall, and that's all I really care about, is inspiring. And you know, I'll say this because I mean this as well. One of the biggest things for me, and not having, you know, from a record standpoint, wins and losses, succeeded at Georgia Tech, I actually am disappointed from the fact that I hope that that doesn't impact another minority in getting a job. I think
Mm,
about that more than I think about me
mm,
losing a job myself, because I'll be fine. I
mhm.
will. I'll be fine. But does that impact another African American coach or a minority from getting their opportunity because of what I didn't do? I worry about these things more than anything.
Damon Stoudamire, appreciate you.
All
Thank you.
right. All right, John.